Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Take Two. We are just days away from the primary election for the Congressional District 2 race. Joining us today is Celeste Maloy. Thanks so much for being with us today.
I'm excited to be here.
So this has been a busy, fast run. How's it been going and what's been keeping you busiest?
The thing that's keeping me the busiest is talking to people. I mean, that's campaigning, right? But it's been a short race and we haven't had much time to make sure that the constituents know who we are. So I've been traveling all over the district, getting in front of every group of people I can, telling my story, talking about why I'm running, and talking about what I want to do.
Name ID is tricky when you have this short amount of time. We're also dealing with just getting out of summer break. People are getting into the rhythm of looking at things right now. And we're sort of seeing that in the poll. The only poll that we've had so far just came out. It did have Becky Edwards in the lead, but the big story is that half of voters haven't made up their minds.
Yeah.
Why have people not made up their minds, you think?
Well, I think part of it is that poll is actually several weeks old. So the people were asked that question before we had even done some of our debates. And I did 11 debates around the district. I think a lot of people got to know me through that. I've held a lot of events since then. I've been on the radio, I've been on TV. So hopefully a lot more people have decided. We only have a few days left. But I think the story is that this has been a short race and people are doing their homework. They're taking their time. I've talked to a lot of people, I've done a lot of events, and the constituents have been amazing. They're showing up. It is summertime. People weren't expecting to do this summer, but they're coming out, they're listening, they're asking really good questions. I think we're going to have a really good turnout.
I want to get to some of their questions and the big issues in just a second, but a couple things that have been floating around that people are talking about. Becky Edwards hasn't really done any interviews media-wise that I've seen. Is that an issue? Is it a job interview, and does it matter that she's not doing media interviews in your mind?
Well, I think it matters. The reason that I went to every county to do events, the reason I went to almost every county to do debates is because people need to have information to be able to make a good decision about who can represent them. And I've tried to be as accessible as possible and make sure that everybody who wants to meet me can meet me. Everyone who wants to ask questions can ask questions. And I hope voters remember that.
On the flip side, when voters are talking, and a lot of what they're hearing is that what was coming out after convention, that maybe you weren't registered to vote and you didn't vote in a couple of elections. That may not sound like a big deal, but when you talk about municipal elections being important and every election being important, why didn't you vote? Why didn't? Because a lot of people don't ever miss. They can look at their entire life for decades and say, I never missed an election.
Yeah, well, if you look at average voter turnouts, there aren't very many people who can say that. I do have a pattern of voting. I didn't vote in 2020 or 2022 because I was a congressional staffer, a Utah resident, working in Washington, D.C. In 2020, everybody was looking for out-of-state ballots, and I thought, as a staffer, it would be better if I just did my work and avoided having my ballot get flagged or having a headline. And I didn't think anyone would ever care how I voted. I never planned on running for Congress, and I made the wrong decision. If I could do it again, I would just vote, because I didn't avoid headlines. I'm answering them now in my race.
So you regret not voting?
Yeah.
So important always for the voice to be heard. You didn't ever want to vote for your congressman, so you knew you had a job the next year?
Well, I knew he was going to win without my vote, and I knew which way Utah's electoral votes were going to go. And so I just thought it'd be better to keep doing the work I was doing for the people of the 2nd Congressional District.
Let's talk about the 2nd Congressional District and what people are talking about. When you're meeting them, what is issue number one that they're most concerned about? Is there an overwhelming number one?
I think there are two top issues: government overreach and inflation. People are worried that their paychecks aren't going as far, that they can't afford the things they want and need, and people are worried that the government is just too involved in our lives. And it doesn't matter where in the district they are, everybody's got something they're concerned about. In southern Utah, it's water and land. In rural Utah, it's water and land. And in northern Utah, it's also water and land, but additionally, the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, they're worried that these executive branch agencies have too much power, they're not checked, and they're too involved in our lives. And I happen to agree, so that's what I spend most of my time talking about.
Let's focus on inflation first here, because I think a lot of people are concerned about inflation, and while we're not going up exponentially, we're not dropping back down either. And it seems like once prices go up, they really don't go back down. How can Congress fix that?
Yeah, one of the factors that makes us have inflation is big spending bills from Congress. If we're pumping a lot of federal dollars into the economy, it raises the prices of things. But also, we were energy independent 4 years ago. Now we're not, and the price of energy is higher. When the price of energy is high, the price of everything else is high. House prices are high, grocery prices are high, the cost of shipping things is higher. So if we could fix some of these systemic problems, not just the spending, we have to fix the spending, but there are other factors that contribute to inflation that are within the government's control.
Spending is systemic, and if you look back historically, Republicans and Democrats have both been a problem since probably the Clinton era when the budget was balanced. So how do you go to Congress and make a change? Because so far the change hasn't been made. Sometimes Republicans will be loud and say, I'm not going to vote for this bill. It passes anyways, but the negotiations never happened to make sure that the spending didn't happen. Because right, left, they're still spending a lot of money.
Yeah, well, it turns out that Americans like the things they get in the budget, and so it makes it tough for people to cut back. Everything in there is in there because somebody got it in there, and we're gonna have to slaughter some of our own sacred cows. Usually when Republicans are in the majority, we want to strip out things the Democrats like, but keep all of the things we like. The only way we're going to fix this is if we strip out things that both parties have put in. And one of the ways that I think we can do that, and I really think this is realistic, this isn't a pie in the sky thing. I think we need to look at the federal agencies and what their budgets are, and look at their statutory authority, what Congress told them they can do, and defund anything they're doing that Congress hasn't authorized in their statutes. People are always running for office and always saying they're going to get rid of agencies. I've never seen anybody do it, but I think it is realistic, ambitious, but realistic, to defund things the agencies are doing without getting rid of the entire agency and getting them back in their statutory box so they're doing what they were intended to do all along.
What agency would be on your chopping block?
All of them. The ones I'm the most familiar with are the natural resources agencies. So one example is the Bureau of Land Management released a new conservation rule. It's a draft rule right now, but their mandate from Congress is to manage land for multiple use. The conservation rule is not multiple use, so it should be defunded. Anything like that that's different than what Congress told an agency to do should just be stripped out.
Speaking of BLM, President Biden recently has made another national monument here in Utah. There was one on the Arizona border. It's an issue because when these monuments are made, whether we like them or not, they need funding. And so that's new funding that comes. And you really can't strip the money away because if Utah is going to be stuck, love or hate with these, they have to be funded so we can take care of the land. We can make sure it's not trash. We can have search and rescue. Yeah. So how do we make that happen?
Well, monuments don't actually get any new funding. So monuments can only be created from federal land, so it's already being managed by a federal land management agency. When it becomes a monument, there's no new funding that comes with that. That's one of the complaints the state has, is that we sort of draw a polygon around something. It's like putting a target on it. We've told the whole world there's something special here, come see it, but we don't have more money for law enforcement to protect the antiquities. We don't have more money for search and rescue. We don't have money for roads and signage to make sure people know where they're going, and it just becomes a bigger problem. And that's one of the reasons that we should stop allowing presidents to create big multi-million acre national monuments. It's a political football, but it's not a good management tool.
In Congressman Stewart's office, a lot of your work has been done on land issues and in southern Utah. There's a lot of different people involved in these conversations, the counties and the people that live there, work there in rural Utah. We have Native American tribes that we're dealing with, and everything else that goes involved, including the people who want a vacation in the areas. How do you balance that as a congressperson?
Well, I think the local elected officials need to have a bigger voice. Legally, they represent the people who live there, and they have jurisdiction over these lands. And right now, the land management agencies make decisions as if every American has an equal voice and an equal interest in these lands. And yes, there are people who want to come vacation in the rural parts of Utah, but they're not getting stuck with the bill for search and rescue. They're not dealing with the changes in the economy. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that the local elected officials have a bigger influence. We should never be creating national monuments without local input, without local buy-in. We'd have a much better outcome if that was the process.
I want to get back to energy prices because right now we've stopped talking about it in the headlines, but gas prices are still high. We're paying close to $5 a gallon. It's a lot of money, whether you're taking your kids to school or commuting to work. Energy prices are getting to be a big strain on people's budgets.
Yeah.
How would you fix this? Would you go back to drilling and fracking in some of the areas that President Biden has said are off limits? Or how do you solve this problem? Is it electric? Where do you go?
All of the above. We need to be drilling and fracking our own resources. We were doing that. We were energy independent. It was good for America. We also need to be investing in new types of energy, including nuclear. We need new baseload sources of energy. And if we're doing an all of the above energy strategy, then we don't have to buy energy from other countries that may not have our best interest, probably don't have our best interest at heart, but also we can produce our own energy and keep our prices low so that people can buy eggs and put their kids through college.
Lightning round, because we're running out of time. When we talk about energy prices and everything, it's all interconnected. The war in Ukraine right now, a lot of the money is going in that direction.
Yeah.
And when that began, I think that's a lot of when we started to see those gas prices go up. They haven't gone back down. Do you support the spending that Congress has been, the spending that is getting sent to Ukraine right now? Why or why not?
We need to stop spending money in Ukraine until we know what our role is there, when we stop playing a role there, and how they've spent the resources we've sent them. Until we know how they've used all the dollars and the equipment we've sent them, we shouldn't send them anything else. When we know that, maybe the answer is still that we shouldn't send them anything else, but we can't make a good decision until we have those answers.
There's arguments that stability in that region matters, and it matters to our country, even if we don't want to spend the money. Do you see that?
I mean, America does have a role to play on the world stage. We're the world's superpower. We can't just pretend there are not things happening outside of our borders, but our role can't be the world's babysitter.
Let's go to the U.S. Southern border. President Biden has made some changes lately that have changed the flow of people coming in, but we've had a mass migration.
Yeah.
Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, for years have said we've got to fix the problem, but it's never popular. There's always another election. How would you change that, and what would be the first step you think could happen to actually making a change and making it better?
I mean, the first step is we have to have control of our border. We have to have control of who and what is coming across our borders and through our ports. Nothing else we do matters.
So do you build a wall, or how do you do it?
Right now, a wall's the best technology I know of to get control. If we find something better, let's switch to that. But until then, we should build the wall.
President Trump started building that. It was ceased. There's been other pieces going up. Let's talk about President Trump. He has multiple indictments against him right now. He is the front runner for the presidential election for the GOP side right now.
Yep.
Do you support him, or is it time for the party to look in another direction?
That's not my decision to make. That's up to the voters. And I've said all along I'll support the nominee. So if he's the nominee, yes, I will support him. The indictments appear to be politically motivated, and we need to be really careful that we're not using the judicial system to influence a political outcome. The voters need to decide if he's the next nominee.
The voters will have to decide. President Biden might also be the nominee on his side as well. It's looking like there could possibly be impeachment hearings that whoever is elected in the Congressional District would also be a part of.
Yeah.
Do you support heading in that direction for President Biden?
I mean, I've answered this question a lot of times. It's a tricky one. I haven't seen any articles of impeachment. If there are high crimes and treasons, then obviously I'm going to support an impeachment trial. But impeachment's supposed to be a last resort, and I think we've started using it as a political gimmick, and we need to be really careful. I think the Trump impeachments were political gimmicks. No one ever thought the Senate was going to remove him from office, and we need to be careful not to just continue this pattern. We need to treat it like it is a last resort and act like our institutions matter.
Last word you get right now. We're out of time. If you could say one last thing to voters, what would it be?
We are down to the wire on this election. So I want everyone to get their votes in by the end of the day on Tuesday. And I hope that they remember who's been showing up, who's been answering questions, who's been sticking to policy and issues and not mudslinging, because I want to prove that that still matters. I won at the convention, I'm the convention nominee, and I've worked hard every day to earn votes and to make sure people know who I am and what I stand for, and I really would love to see that reflected at the ballot box.
Will you be voting in this election?
I will be voting in this election.
Excellent. Celeste Maloy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.